Good evening. I'm Alex Truth.
And I'm Maya Clarity. Welcome to Truth Report, where we cut through the noise to expose what's really happening in artificial intelligence.
Tonight, we're bringing you 3 stories that on the surface seem unrelated. China developing AI chips. OpenAI pushing ads. ChatGPT getting hacked again. But when you dig deeper, you'll see a pattern emerging, a pattern that reveals the fundamental instability of the entire AI industry.
We're talking about an industry hemorrhaging billions, racing towards surveillance capitalism, and selling products with security holes they can't fix. And we have the documents to prove it.
Let's start with breaking news out of China that most Western media is glossing over, but shouldn't be.
According to the South China Morning Post, state-owned China Telecom has developed what they're calling Telechat 3, the country's first artificial intelligence models using mixture of experts architecture trained entirely on domestic Huawei chips, specifically the Ascend 910B processors paired with Huawei's Mindspore framework.
Now, for those not familiar with the technical jargon, mixture of experts models are significant because they distribute computational tasks across specialized submodels. This means you get high performance without needing as many resources. It's become the industry standard because it's efficient. Companies can train powerful AI without burning through quite as much electricity and hardware.
And here's why this matters. This is the first time a Chinese developer has publicly validated that they can train cutting-edge AI models without any American chips whatsoever. 0 NVIDIA GPUs. 0 AMD processors. Entirely domestic technology.
Let's be clear about the geopolitical context here. The United States has spent years implementing export controls designed specifically to kneecap China's AI development. The Biden administration restricted sales of advanced NVIDIA chips to Chinese companies. They've blocked access to crucial semiconductor manufacturing equipment. The entire strategy was predicated on one assumption: China cannot build competitive AI without American technology.
And what China Telecom just announced is that assumption may be wrong. Now, we need to be honest about the performance gap. Telechat 3's benchmarks still lag behind models like OpenAI's GPT-4. The South China Morning Post report makes that clear. Chinese AI researchers themselves acknowledge they still rely on smuggled or older generation US chips for the most advanced work.
But here's what should terrify Washington: the gap is closing. These models range from 105 billion parameters to potentially trillions. That's not amateur hour. That's serious infrastructure. And according to the researchers quoted in the report, they've solved critical bottlenecks in frontier-scale model training using only domestic hardware.
Beijing has made technological self-reliance across the entire AI stack a 5-year strategic priority. They're restricting domestic approvals for even NVIDIA's newest H200 chips to exceptional cases only. They're forcing their entire AI industry to innovate around American export controls.
And what does the US do when export controls don't work? Historically, we escalate. More sanctions. More restrictions. But every restriction is also an incentive for China to build more robust domestic alternatives. We're watching the birth of a parallel AI ecosystem in real time.
This matters because it's happening while the American AI industry is facing a completely different crisis, one that's entirely self-inflicted.
Which brings us to our second story. OpenAI, the company that sparked the current AI boom with ChatGPT, has announced it will begin testing advertisements in ChatGPT for free users and a new $8 per month tier called ChatGPT Go.
Now, OpenAI is framing this as expanding access, as democratizing AI. In their official blog post, they talk about offering more choices to users. But let's talk about what's actually happening here, because the financial documents tell a very different story.
According to reports from CNBC and WebPro News citing internal OpenAI financial projections, the company lost $9 billion in 2025 alone. $9 billion in a single year. Their internal documents project operational costs exceeding $7 billion annually, with total operating losses potentially hitting $74 billion by 2028.
That's not a typo. $74 billion in operating losses by 2028. Financial analyst Sebastian Malaby has publicly stated that OpenAI could run out of money within 18 months if they don't radically change their revenue model.
So what's the plan? Flood ChatGPT with ads. Their internal projections, obtained by European Business Magazine, estimate that free user monetization will generate $1 billion in 2026, scaling to nearly $25 billion by 2029. That's the business model: turn free users into advertising inventory.
And let's be absolutely clear what this means for the user experience. Ads will appear at the bottom of ChatGPT responses when there's a relevant sponsored product or service based on the current conversation. They're monetizing your questions. They're monetizing your conversations with an AI. Every time you ask ChatGPT for help, they're analyzing that query for advertising opportunities.
This is surveillance capitalism applied to conversational AI. You're not the customer, you're the product being sold to advertisers. And OpenAI has to do this because their fundamental business model is unsustainable. The computational costs of running these models are astronomical. They're spending billions on data centers, with plans to spend over $1 trillion on AI infrastructure by 2030 according to their own projections.
$1 trillion. And they still can't make the economics work without turning to ads. Now, they're promising that Plus, Pro, Business, and Enterprise subscribers won't see ads. If you pay, you're protected from the monetization machine. But this creates a two-tier system. Wealthy users get a clean experience, and everyone else gets their conversations mined for ad targeting.
And here's the brutal irony. While OpenAI is desperately trying to monetize its way out of a financial hole, the product they're selling, the product they're about to plaster with ads, has fundamental security vulnerabilities they can't fix.
Which brings us to our third story, and this is where things get really disturbing. In January 2026, security researchers disclosed multiple data pilfering attacks against ChatGPT that expose a pattern of unfixable vulnerabilities in large language models.
Let's start with something called the zombie agent attack, discovered by Radware security researchers Vika Babwa. He reported this to OpenAI back in September 2025. They fixed it in mid-December. And then he published his findings on January 8, showing exactly how the attack worked.
Zombie agent exploits a fundamental weakness in how ChatGPT processes URLs. Attackers send prompts containing pre-constructed static URLs that exfiltrate sensitive data from your ChatGPT conversations one character at a time. The technique allows for persistence, meaning once the attack is planted, it continuously steals every conversation between you and ChatGPT without your knowledge.
Think about what you might have told ChatGPT. Personal information. Business strategies. Passwords you asked it to help generate. Medical questions. Legal concerns. All of that can be siphoned off to attacker-controlled servers, character by character, invisible to you.
And here's the key point that the Ars Technica headline captures perfectly: this is a vicious cycle. OpenAI fixed the zombie agent vulnerability specifically, but the underlying architecture that makes ChatGPT vulnerable wasn't fixed, because it can't be fixed without fundamentally redesigning how large language models work.
Security researcher reports from Tenable disclosed 7 different vulnerabilities in GPT-4o and the upcoming GPT-5 models, including memory injection and conversation injection techniques, that could be exploited to steal personal information from users' memories and chat histories. These aren't edge cases. These are fundamental architectural problems.
And then in the same month, we learned that 2 malicious Chrome extensions were caught stealing ChatGPT and DeepSeek conversations from over 900,000 users, exfiltrating every conversation to remote command and control servers every 30 minutes. This is according to reports from the Hacker News and OX Security.
The attack vector is almost comically simple. Attackers send emails containing malicious instructions that ChatGPT reads when performing Gmail actions. The AI exfiltrates your data before you even see the email content. It can't tell the difference between your legitimate instructions and attacker-controlled data.
And this is the core problem. Large language models cannot distinguish between legitimate user instructions and malicious prompts embedded in external data sources. It's called prompt injection, and researchers have been shouting about this vulnerability for years. OpenAI knows about it. Every AI company knows about it. And they're shipping products anyway.
OpenAI published a blog post in January about continuously hardening ChatGPT Atlas against prompt injection attacks. That phrasing is telling: continuously hardening, not solving. Because they can't solve it. The architecture of these models makes them inherently vulnerable to this class of attack.
So let's connect these 3 stories, because this is where the pattern becomes clear. China is building domestic AI infrastructure because they've been cut off from American chips. OpenAI is burning through billions and turning to surveillance advertising to stay afloat. And the products these companies are racing to deploy have security holes they cannot fix.
This is an industry built on unsustainable economics, selling vulnerable products, in the middle of an accelerating geopolitical tech war. And the people paying the price are users, people whose conversations are being monetized, whose data is being stolen, who are being told these tools are safe when they fundamentally aren't.
Let's look at the incentive structure. OpenAI is projected to lose $74 billion by 2028 unless they radically increase revenue. So what do? They push ChatGPT into every possible use case. They integrate it into enterprise software, into education, into healthcare. They need scale to justify the infrastructure costs.
But that scale comes with risk. The more people use ChatGPT, the more attack surface there is. The more sensitive data flows through these systems, the more valuable that data becomes to attackers. And we've now seen proof that attackers are successfully exfiltrating that data at scale, 900,000 users compromised through browser extensions alone.
And OpenAI can't just shut down the risky features, because they need the growth. They need the user numbers to show investors and advertisers. They're trapped in a growth at all costs mentality even as the security researchers are publishing paper after paper showing the systems are fundamentally insecure.
Meanwhile, China is watching all of this chaos and building its own ecosystem. They're not subject to the same venture capital pressures. State-owned China Telecom doesn't have to turn a profit next quarter. They can invest in long-term strategic technology development without worrying about appeasing Silicon Valley investors.
And here's what keeps me up at night. The United States' response to China's technological advancement has been restrictions and export controls. But we're not investing in our own alternatives at the same scale. We're letting private companies like OpenAI burn through billions of dollars chasing artificial general intelligence while they can't even secure the products they're selling today.
The Chinese model is state-directed investment in strategic technologies. The American model is surveillance capitalism and venture-funded hype cycles. And right now, neither model is producing safe, sustainable, trustworthy AI systems.
Let's talk about what happens next. OpenAI's ads are rolling out in the coming weeks to US users. That means within months, ChatGPT conversations will be monetized at scale. Your questions will be analyzed for advertising opportunities. Your data will become revenue.
And every conversation you have with ChatGPT is potentially vulnerable to prompt injection attacks, memory injection, conversation exfiltration, attacks that researchers say may never be fully preventable given how these models work. OpenAI's own blog post admits their continuously hardening defenses, which is corporate speak for we're playing whack-a-mole with an endless stream of vulnerabilities.
China will continue developing domestic AI capabilities, and the performance gap will continue narrowing. The export controls aren't stopping them, they're just forcing them to innovate domestically. And when China does achieve parity with Western AI systems, they'll have done it with a completely independent technology stack.
Which means the US will have lost its leverage. The entire strategy of using chip exports as geopolitical control falls apart when the other side doesn't need your chips anymore. And we'll be left with an AI industry that's financially unstable, security compromised, and built on surveillance advertising.
So what do we do about this? Because this isn't just about AI companies and geopolitics, this is about ordinary people who are using these tools, trusting these systems with sensitive information, and being told everything is fine when the evidence shows it clearly isn't.
First, we need transparency. OpenAI and every other AI company should be required to disclose the security vulnerabilities in their systems. Not in academic papers that get published months after the fact, but in clear, accessible warnings to users. If ChatGPT can't distinguish between legitimate instructions and prompt injection attacks, users deserve to know that before they put sensitive information into the system.
Second, we need to have an honest conversation about the economics of AI. If these companies can't build sustainable business models without surveillance advertising, maybe that's telling us something. Maybe the current approach, train bigger models, deploy them everywhere, monetize the users, is fundamentally broken.
And third, we need a real industrial policy response to China's AI development that isn't just sanctions and export controls. If we believe AI is strategically important, and clearly both Washington and Beijing do, then we need public investment in secure, trustworthy AI infrastructure, not just letting venture-backed companies burn through billions chasing hype.
Because right now, we're watching 3 train wrecks happening simultaneously. China building a parallel AI ecosystem. OpenAI collapsing into surveillance advertising. And security researchers publishing exploit after exploit showing these systems can't be trusted with sensitive data.
And the people in power, in government, in corporate boardrooms, are either ignoring these problems or pretending they'll somehow solve themselves through market forces and innovation. They won't. The incentives are all wrong. The economics don't work. And the technology has fundamental flaws.
We've reached out to OpenAI for comment on the security vulnerabilities and the advertising rollout. As of airtime, they pointed us to their blog posts but declined to answer specific questions about the financial projections or the long-term viability of their security measures. China Telecom did not respond to requests for comment. Huawei provided a statement emphasizing their commitment to domestic innovation but did not address questions about performance gaps with Western AI systems.
The documents don't lie. OpenAI is burning billions and turning to ads to survive. ChatGPT has unfixable security vulnerabilities. And China is systematically building technological independence while the US relies on export controls that are clearly failing to stop their progress.
This is the state of AI in 2026. Financially unsustainable, security compromised, and trapped in a geopolitical competition that's driving all the wrong incentives. Until we face these facts honestly, nothing is going to change.
That's our show for tonight. I'm Alex Truth.
And I'm Maya Clarity. Keep questioning. Keep demanding transparency. And don't trust any system that can't explain why it's safe.
Thanks for watching Truth Report.